At my brother Christopher's wedding, the coordinator didn't even look up when I reached the front of the line. She was checking names off a list, her hands moving with the brisk efficiency of someone who just wanted to get through the count. Ahead of me, guests were being handed thick velvet-lined gold bands. They looked expensive, the kind of accessory that signaled you belonged in the VIP section of a nightclub, not a wedding reception. I watched my aunt and uncle put theirs on, smiling as they were ushered toward the main ballroom where the champagne tower was already flowing. When I stepped up, I smiled, ready to give my name. But the coordinator paused. She frowned at her clipboard, flipping a page back and forth. Then without a word, she reached under the table and pulled out a different box. It wasn't velvet. It was cardboard. She handed me a thin neon yellow plastic wristband. The kind you get at a cheap concert or a county fair to prove you're old enough to buy a beer. Printed on it in bold black letters were 3 words. Evening guest only. I stared at it. I didn't take it at first. I thought it was a mistake. I was the sister of the groom. I had spent the last 6 months planning this entire event for free. I had negotiated the vendor contracts, designed the seating charts, and personally sourced the vintage linens my mother insisted on. I wasn't an evening guest. I was the reason there was an evening. Then my mother, Deborah, appeared at my elbow. She didn't look at me. She was scanning the room, making sure the important guests were happy. She leaned in close, her voice a practiced whisper that wouldn't carry. Just put it on, Samantha. The budget was tighter than we thought, so we had to make some cuts for the dinner service. There's no plate for you. She paused, smoothing the front of her dress. You can grab a snack at the bar later. And try not to stand too close to the head table during photos. The yellow clashes with the color scheme. She patted my arm and walked away. She didn't wait for a response. She didn't apologize. She just issued a directive and expected me to follow it like I always did. I stood there holding that cheap piece of plastic, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. It wasn't just an insult. It was a demotion. It was a physical symbol of exactly where I stood in this family. They had extracted every ounce of utility they could get from me. My labor, my time, my expertise. And now that the work was done, I was being discarded. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't put the wristband on. I couldn't. It felt radioactive. I walked away from the check-in table and found a quiet corner near the bar, the only place I was apparently allowed to be. From my vantage point, I could see everything. The servers were lighting the candles on the tables I had designed. The band was setting up on the stage I had booked. The flowers, thousands of dollars worth of imported peonies, were arranged exactly how I had instructed the florist. Every detail in this room had my fingerprints on it. And yet I wasn't welcome to sit at a table. I wasn't a guest. I was staff. Unpaid, unappreciated staff. I looked down at the neon band in my hand. It was flimsy, cheap. It was the kind of thing you cut off and threw away the second you got home. And that's what I was to them. Disposable. Deborah hadn't even looked me in the eye when she said it. That was the part that stuck with me. She knew it was wrong. She knew it was cruel. She just didn't care enough to stop it. She cared more about the optics of the yellow band clashing with her photos than she did about her own daughter going hungry at her son's wedding. My gaze drifted to the gift table near the entrance. It was piled high with beautifully wrapped boxes and envelopes. In the center sat the wishing well, a heavy locked glass box for cards that I had specially ordered because my mother was paranoid about theft. It was already half full of envelopes, and somewhere near the bottom of that pile was mine. A thick, cream-colored envelope made of heavy cardstock. Inside was a cashier's check for $15,000. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. $15,000. I had saved for 2 years for that money. I had worked overtime, taken on freelance gigs, skipped vacations, and lived on a strict budget. It was supposed to be the down payment for Christopher and Emily's first house. It was supposed to be the gift that proved once and for all that I was a good sister. That I supported them. That I belonged. I had imagined the moment they opened it. I had imagined Christopher's shock, my mother's approval, my father's nod of respect. I had imagined buying my way into their gratitude. But looking at that yellow wristband, the fantasy dissolved. They didn't want my support. They wanted my submission. They wanted my money, sure, but they didn't want me. They were happy to take the check, but they wouldn't even give me a plate of chicken in return. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't just being excluded. I was being used. And I had let them do it. I had handed them the tools to dismantle my self-respect, and then I had thanked them for the privilege. But not tonight. I reached into my purse and felt the cool metal of a key. The spare key to the wishing well. I was the planner. I was the only one besides my mother who had a copy. I looked around. The guests were moving toward the patio for cocktail hour. The foyer was empty. The coordinator was busy arguing with a waiter about tray placement. I didn't rush. I didn't look guilty. I walked calmly over to the gift table, acting like I was just adjusting a decoration. I slid the key into the lock. It clicked silently. I lifted the lid just enough to slide my hand in. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I knew exactly what I was looking for. My envelope was distinct, oversized, sealed with a custom wax stamp I had made myself. I sifted through the pile, pushing aside generic cards and thin envelopes. There it was. I pulled it out. It felt heavy in my hand. Heavier than paper should be. It felt like 2 years of my life. It felt like every weekend I had worked instead of resting. It felt like every time I had said no to my friends so I could say yes to my family. I held it for a second, just looking at my name written in calligraphy on the front. To Christopher and Emily. Then I did something I never thought I would do. I took the neon yellow wristband, the symbol of my demotion by worthlessness in their eyes, and I slid it into the pocket of my dress. Oh wait, that wasn't enough. I ripped the envelope open. I took out the check. I folded it and put it in my clutch. Then I took the yellow wristband and dropped it inside my empty envelope. I resealed it as best I could, pressing the wax back down. I dropped the envelope back into the box. It landed with a soft thud. A Trojan horse. A message. I locked the box. I put the key back in my purse. And then I turned around and walked out the side door into the cool night air. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't make a scene. I just vanished. The drive home was quiet. My car hummed along the highway, the city lights blurring past me. The check sat on the passenger seat next to me, glowing faintly under the streetlights. $15,000. I thought about what that money meant. It wasn't just currency. It was leverage. It was power. And for the first time in my life I was holding on to it. I started to think about why I had done it. Why I had saved that much money in the first place. Why I had worked myself into the ground for people who clearly didn't respect me. It was the gambler's hope. That's what it was. I had been gambling on their love. I thought if the stakes were high enough, if the buy-in was big enough, I could force the house to let me win. I thought if I was the perfect planner, the perfect sister, the perfect financial safety net, they would have to love me. They would have to see me. I was paying membership dues to a club that never intended to let me in. I was the tier 2 sister. The backup plan. The stuff. And no amount of money was ever going to change the membership rules. I reached over and touched the check. It felt cool and crisp. It was my money. My life. And I wasn't going to spend it on people who wouldn't even feed me. By the time I got to my apartment, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I walked inside, kicked off my heels, and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat on my couch in the dark, listening to the silence. It was peaceful. Then I realized something. I wasn't just a guest they had excluded. I was the architect of their entire event. I knew every vendor contract. I knew every password. I knew every detail. And I knew about the honeymoon. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my travel app. Upcoming trip. Maldives. 5 days. I stared at the screen. I had booked that trip. I had used my corporate elite status, my accumulated points from years of business travel, to get them upgrades they couldn't possibly afford on their own. The overwater bungalow. The first-class flights. The private transfers. It was all under my account. I took a sip of wine. They thought the yellow wristband was the end of the story. They thought they could humiliate me and I would just take it like I always did. They thought I was safe. They were wrong. The next morning, the silence broke. My phone started vibrating at 8 in the morning and didn't stop. I watched the names flash across the screen. Mother, Christopher, Father. I let them ring. Then the text started. Mother, Samantha, we opened the box. What is this? Christopher, is this a joke? Where is the check? We need that money for the closing costs on Monday. Father, you are selfish and petty. Ruining your brother's moment because you didn't get a steak dinner? Grow up. I read them calmly, sipping my coffee. There was no remorse. No, are you okay? No, we're sorry we hurt you. Just anger that I hadn't played my part. They weren't mad that they had humiliated me. They were mad that the ATM had stopped dispensing cash. Christopher sent another one. You owe us that money. We already put the offer in based on your promise. If we lose this house, it's on you. The word hung in the air. I owed them nothing. I put my coffee cup down. I opened my laptop. I logged into the travel portal. There was the itinerary. Maldives, the ultimate luxury escape. I looked at the cancel booking button. It was right there. Red and inviting. I didn't hesitate. I didn't second guess. I clicked it. A pop-up window appeared. Are you sure? This action cannot be undone. All non-refundable deposits will be forfeited or converted to credit for the account holder. Yes, I whispered. I'm sure. I clicked confirm. The screen refreshed. Cancelled. I watched as the points flooded back into my account. Hundreds of thousands of miles. Hotel credits. Upgrade certificates. All of it returning to me. The itinerary was stripped bare. The flights were gone. The bungalow was released back into inventory. If they wanted to go to the Maldives now, they would have to pay the rack rate. And without my check, they couldn't even afford the flight to the airport. I closed my laptop. 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was my father. He left a voicemail. I listened to it on speaker. His voice was shaking with rage. You little thief. You stole their honeymoon. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to call the police. You fix this right now, Samantha, or you are dead to this family. Dead to the family. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I was already dead to them. I was a ghost they only summoned when they needed something moved or paid for. Then a different notification popped up. A text message. But not from my family. It was from Emily, the bride. I stared at her name. We weren't close. She was nice enough, quiet, always seemed a bit overwhelmed by my mother's intensity. Why was she texting me? I opened it. It was a screenshot. A long text thread between Christopher and my mother from 3 weeks ago. Emily, Samantha, I am so sorry. I didn't know. I read the screenshot. Mother, the catering bill is over budget. We need to cut 10 heads. Christopher, cut the cousins. Then Samantha. She doesn't need a meal. Mother, are you sure? She's planning the whole thing. Christopher, she won't care. Tell Emily that Samantha volunteered to sit out so she could manage the vendors. Tell her Sam didn't want a plate. Emily won't question it if it comes from me. I dropped the phone. The air left my lungs. It wasn't just my mother being cheap. It wasn't just an oversight. It was Christopher, my brother, the golden child I had spent my life trying to impress. He had actively lied to his wife to cut me out. He had painted me as the martyr who wanted to be excluded so he wouldn't look like the villain for starving his own sister. He had sold me out for a plate of chicken. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete, that it burned away the last remnants of hesitation. There was no going back now. There was no reconciliation. There was only the truth. And I was going to deliver it. I picked up my keys. I grabbed the printed screenshot. I got in my car. I drove to my parents' house. I knew they would all be there for the gift opening brunch. The brunch I hadn't been invited to. When I walked in, the front door was unlocked. They were in the living room. The atmosphere was funereal. My mother was crying on the sofa. Christopher was pacing, red-faced, yelling into his phone, probably trying to rebook the flights. My father was sitting in his armchair, staring at the wall. They stopped when they saw me. You, my father snarled, standing up. You have a lot of nerve showing your face here. Fix it, Christopher shouted, taking a step toward me. Fix the honeymoon right now, Samantha. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell back. I just held up my phone. Emily sent me this, I said. My voice was deadly calm. Christopher froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. She sent me the text where you lied to her, I continued. Where you told her I volunteered not to eat. Where you told Mom to cut me to save money. My mother stopped crying. She looked at Christopher, then at me. Christopher stammered. It wasn't. I didn't mean. You meant it, I said. You meant every word. You wanted my money, you wanted my labor, but you didn't want me. You treated me like staff. Well, staff gets paid. And since you didn't pay me, I took my severance. I looked at my father. You want to sue me? Go ahead. Show a judge these texts. Show them how you defrauded your own daughter to pay for a party she wasn't allowed to attend. I turned back to Christopher. The check is voided. The honeymoon is gone. And Emily knows you're a liar. I think the house closing is the least of your problems. I turned around and walked out. Behind me, I heard the silence break. I heard Emily's voice from the hallway. She must have been listening. I heard her ask Christopher if it was true. I heard him try to deny it, and I heard her tell him to get out. I got back in my car. I drove to the airport. I had a flight to catch. The Maldives were lovely this time of year, and I had a lot of points to use. I sat in the first-class lounge, sipping champagne. I looked out at the tarmac. I was alone. I had no family to go home to. I had no brother to protect. I had no parents to please. And for the first time in 28 years I was free. They would call me the villain. They would tell everyone I ruined the wedding, stole the honeymoon, and broke the family. Let them. If protecting my dignity made me the villain in their story, then I would wear that title like a crown. I was done being the Tier 2 sister. I was the protagonist of my own life now. And the view from here was spectacular. If you've ever had to become the villain to save yourself, share this story. You are not alone.